clap. All right. And let me get to the screen for Facebook and launch it on Facebook. Go live. This is my first time doing this on Facebook. It says I don't have permission to live stream. All right, I'll just record it and then just post it on Facebook. How about that? That's strange. Oh, I know what happened because I posted too many times the other day. Facebook and their rules. Josh, no, because he's grocery shopping. All right.
No. Otherwise, I could fix this.
Yeah, I have learned a valuable lesson. Don't post anything within a day or two before a lecture or presentation. All right, let me close this. And I'll get to my opening statements. All right, good day, everyone. Before we begin, please note that this meeting will be recorded. We anticipate a very engaging, open discussion. MLPS, which is the Marquise de Lafayette Philomath Society, was created on December 10th, 2022, on the foundation of hosting lectures open to all topics familiar to Freemasonry, but not limited to those for the betterment and improvement of the craft. We are a public organization that is not in affiliation with any Grand Lodge and welcomes everyone for enlightenment. MLPS lectures are not a platform to engage in jurisdictional issues, but highly encourage fostering diversity, harmony, and respect for all. Disclaimer, any views expressed and/or opinions shared by the host and speakers are not a reflection of their Grand Lodges nor lodges of membership. And today we have, let me get to your bio. Most worshipful Russ Charvonia. Hopefully I said that and didn't chop it up. He is.
You pronounced it better than I do.
He is the past master of Masons in California from 2024 to 2015. He has served as master of his lodge in Ventura, which is Channel Island Lodge number 214. I'm going to skip down to his greatest passions, which is to restore civility in society using the Masonic virtues and teachings. He is doing this by leading the Masonic Family Civility Project and is serving as past president of the Worldwide Civility Council, which is a nonprofit dedicated to restoring civility to society. He recently co-authored a book with brother Michael Ashley, the Civility Mosaic, how anyone can use the principles of Freemasonry to repair our world. He lives in Ventura, California with his wife of 25 years, Linda, who is also a past honored queen and recipient of the degree of Royal Purple of Bethel 89 and Job's Daughters International. Russ and Linda have a daughter and a son and a daughter-in-law. And his father-in-law is the most worshipful Harry L. Maynard, served as the 117th Grand Master of Masons in California and Hawaii in 1982 to 83. Russ, I'm gonna let you take it away and you can begin your topic.
Thank you, Cleo. I'm not sure where you got that bio from, because it's clearly 6 years old. My wife and I have been married 31 years now.
You sent it.
Boy, I'll have to go back and check it out, and I'll have to say for more than 3 decades, perhaps. I don't have to remember to update it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'd asked you to just say he's a heck of a guy, but
You
I couldn't
are.
get you to do that. It's a pleasure to get to present to each of you and hopefully engage in some discussion. You can see by my topic here that this is something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I think that is an urgent need. We know that the world about us is becoming increasingly uncivil. It seems that we cannot even stand to be in the same room sometimes with somebody who has a different opinion from our own. And when I used to do these presentations back in 2014 or so, I'd often ask for a show of hands, who's faced some incivility in recent times? And, a hand or two would go up. And well, last week something happened. I don't do that anymore because it is so prevalent that we don't have to think back that far. If you drove on a freeway, if you're in a coffee shop like Josh, if you're in a grocery store like Josh's wife, you're very likely to encounter acts of incivility. The question is, can we do anything about it? And again, back 2014, several of us decided that we need to do something about it. We need to take the teachings, the symbols, the language, the philosophy, the tenets, the morals of Freemasonry, and use those to help to restore civility first within the craft and then beyond the 4 walls of our lodge. And we realized early on that this is going to be a journey, not unlike the Masonic journey that most of us have taken. And that just like driving along a freeway or a highway, sometimes we're going to inadvertently take an exit that we didn't mean to. In our own lives, there are going to be times where we begrudgingly or unintentionally were uncivil to somebody. The good news is just like when we're driving on that freeway, if we're patient, if we wait a while, we'll be able to get on an on-ramp and pursue our journey again. Same with our path towards civility. Same thing with our Masonic journeys. We are each, those rough ashlers, always striving to become the ever more perfect ashlar, recognizing we will never quite get there. So when we first started this back in the early part of 2014, a group of us were meeting every month via a predecessor to Zoom. It was called Sakoko at the time. And we thought the natural place for us to start would be to define the word civility. Seemed like a logical enough place to start. Seemed like it ought to be relatively easy. Well, after 4 months of futility, where we kept writing and rewriting different definitions, I did what I should have done at the outset, which was what? I Googled it. I typed in the word civility into Wikipedia, that font of all knowledge, and had one of those aha moments, because all that it said was see incivility. You see, back then, it was easier to describe what civility is not than what it is. Well, if you Google it now, go into Wikipedia and type in the word civility, you will see a definition. It's a definition we put in there, thanks primarily to the lion's share of the work done by Worshipful Brandon Lippincott, who actually is your way, and he's in Northern Virginia. And you look carefully, you will see several Masonic connections to it. There were a lot more when we first submitted it, but they've been weeded out over time. But I think that says it all when it is easier to state what civility is not than what it is. Now, I've had people over the years tell me, well, being civil is just simply about being polite, applying the rules of etiquette, avoiding difficult conversations. I've had others tell me it has nothing to do with that. It's merely about having a basic level of dignity and respect for other people so that you can engage in the difficult conversations that we must have in order to solve society's ills. So I think it's a combination of them. I don't think you can have a civil conversation with somebody if you don't have that basic level of dignity and respect toward them, and if you don't treat them with some level of courtesy and etiquette, if you will. By the way, there are going to be some people that we encounter that simply don't warrant our civility. I'll give you a quick example. Many, many moons ago, Grand Master of a Southern Lodge in the US, I won't state where or who, and I were having a conversation. And we were talking about different things. And for reasons I don't know why, he said, you know what, most worshipful, I will never be caught sitting in lodge with a black man. And I was stunned. I was stunned. And my immediate reaction was to lunge at him. You idiot. What are you thinking? Well, you're clearly not thinking. My next reaction was, gosh, I wonder if I can change his mind. And all of these thoughts were within a nanosecond, of course. And I finally decided to respond this way. Most worshipful, this conversation is over. I no longer have enough respect for you that I can continue to engage in a meaningful, worthwhile conversation. So rather than doing something I later regret, I just got up and excused myself from the discussion. And to this day, I have no respect for that man. Maybe something could happen to bring us back into a room to talk. But I decided not to follow through on my first or second inclinations, but rather just he wasn't worth my investment of time. So the question I ask is it time for the Masonic family to make a difference? What do you all think? I think it is, again, for the reasons I described earlier, that we have the morals, the ethics, the teachings, the principles, the symbols, the language of how to treat people with dignity and respect. And to say it a little differently, if we don't take on this effort, then who will? And if not now, then when would be the appropriate time? I've had a lot of people tell me over the period that we've been doing this that, civility and incivility is just purely cyclical. And if you wait it out, it'll get better. To this, I have two comments. First of all, what's wrong with us doing what we can to shorten this period of negativity, of incivility? If we can make it better sooner, why shouldn't we? My second and bigger concern is, what if they're wrong? What if this incivility, this treating people so poorly in so many parts of our lives, becomes so much a part of our moral fabric, so much a habit of who we are and what we do, that we can't later change it? That it would take generations possibly to get it back onto a decent track. And I'm fearing more and more that is becoming the case. So I firmly believe it is time for us as members of the Masonic family to do what we can to turn things around. One of the reasons is we have the tools. If you walk into a lodge room and you look at the pillars, you look at all the different symbols and the working tools that we have, you can take every one of these, I think, and talk about what it tells us about how to treat people. And just stop and think about what the compasses tell us. The square, the plumb, the level, the 24-inch gauge, they all have to do with how we are to treat one another. And I think this is, there's nothing unique in this effort we're doing. I think what we just landed on is that it's the umbrella for all things Masonically related. And if you're familiar with our Masonic youth orders, Job's Daughters, Rainbow for Girls, and DMLA for Young Boys, their precepts and epics and teachings all also state how to treat people with dignity and respect in one way or another. I've sat down with members of each of the youth orders and gone through their precepts, their stations of the bow, and epics and Job's Daughters, and they've been able to tie virtually every one of them to this concept of civility. It's not an accident. But we also have to take this out into the greater world, I believe. The other reason is because of our role in society. We have a long history of fostering civil dialogue and building societies that are civil. Think of the founding of the United States. So much of the Masonic values are incorporated in our founding documents. That isn't by accident. It's because so many founding fathers were in fact Masons. Now, does that mean that they just got together and kumbaya and let's put it all together? No. We know that they struggled with it, that they yelled at each other, that they threatened each other to duels, for crying out loud. But I think we've gotten away from the fact that we need to be helping to drive society, not in the name of Freemasons, but because we are Freemasons, just as our predecessors have done. Think about your local community. You drive around and you see buildings and parks and streets named after Masons from prior generations. Who among us is going to have a building or a park or a name or a street named after us because we've made that kind of impact on our community? It's not that they were any smarter than us back then or any more capable. It's that they inserted themselves in society to structure it the way they thought was appropriate, again, using the Masonic ideals. Another reason I think we have a place to play in this, and this is very appropriate for this group, and that is our cultural sensitivity. We take people from all different walks of life and bring them together and work together for the greater good. When we are practicing Masonry well, we are figuring out who best can work and best agree to accomplish great good. Are we perfect at it? No. We have a lot of room for improvement as a craft. But I still think we do it better than almost any other organization known to humankind. And then finally, to be a little crass, we have a delivery system. We have some 2 million Masons across North America, 4.5 to 5 million across the globe. And while those numbers have shrunk, we still have the means to make a dent in the incivility in society. The need is there. The need is there within society. The need is there also within the craft. What I have found is, and I hope most of you have as well, the greatest number of people who are coming to the craft are younger. In California, 18 to 30 something year old. And they're coming to the craft looking to be a part of something bigger, greater than than themselves. We hear all the time, oh, the younger generation has a short attention span. Nonsense. Have you ever watched any of them play video games for hours or days on end? When they feel rewarded by something they're doing, they will give it their all. So it's up to us to deliver to them as leaders of our lodges what it is that they're seeking, helping them to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And we're finding this civility effort does just that with that newer, younger Mason. It also is helping to re-engage the older, longer tenured Mason, the one who may not come to stated meetings so much because, what is there to it but other than reading the minutes and arguing over the bills and eating green beans for dinner. But it's helping that longer tenured Mason to recommit to their obligations and their teachings of Freemasonry and put it back to use in their everyday living. We hear a lot about how maybe Masonry is losing its relevance. Well, if you look at the sheer numbers, we could state that. Membership is down 20% over the last decade. Our membership from its 1959 peak across the globe is down by 3/4, going on 80% now. And here's something that I think is an interesting realization. It used to be that 4.5% of the men in society were Masons. That's now less than 1/10 of 1%. So we're not, my wife, when we first started dating, she's the reason I became a Mason because of her involvement with her through her father. But she used to say Masons are like germs, they're everywhere. Since the pandemic, we don't use that phrase so much, but you think about any other group that was 4.5% of society and what kind of impact they could have, that's pretty dramatic. So we have two things that we can do with this data, in my opinion. We can say it's a lost cause. We have no more ability to influence the society around us and our communities. Or we can say in spite of this and because of this, we are going to be more powerful, more vocal. Again, because if we don't, who will? And we're afraid of the continued deterioration of society. I want to open up. Anybody have any immediate thoughts or questions before I move on? Okay, I'm trying to keep an eye on you. Don't hesitate to unmute and pipe up.
Guys.
Please don't. I get tired of listening to myself, so I'd much rather engage. Josh?
Just over here nodding along. You know, I find myself, I've made similar arguments about statistics and how we can look at those statistics to tell us whether or not what we in the industry would call product market fit. We have a system of behavior and belief that we think is going to improve the world. The target market is every single human being, I think, for some of us. And the question is, you know, what explains that gap between the importance that we assign to the work we're doing and the public's reception to it? And I think that's very appreciated. And I appreciate that you brought that up.
Boy, and we could spend 2 days talking about those aspects of it. And I would love to get more into it with you. I think each of us, when we walk into a lodge room, looks around, takes it all in. And, you know, in my mind, I kind of rate them, you know, boy, this is beautiful. This is, you know, one of the top 5 or what have you. But I also notice what's missing. Now, there's one symbol that I always look for. It's not required furnishings in California. It may be in your jurisdiction, but it is that point within the circle. And as I go through this from my lens, I want you to think about how you can share what this teaches us outside of the 4 walls of our lodge. Because I think these are concepts that everybody with whom we come in contact can benefit from. And again, they don't have to know it's Masonic in nature. That point is set to represent what? Each of us, the individual who is striving to improve themselves. And we realize that we have all these tensions and pressures of the world around us that are tugging at us, pushing at us, trying to take us in a direction we don't want to go. So we need some assistance to develop into the kind of person we truly strive to be. And the first thing taught when we walk inside a lodge is that we're to take the compasses and circumscribe a circle around ourselves, creating a boundary beyond which we're not to allow our passions and our prejudices to begin to intrude upon the rights and enjoyment of others. Does this mean we shouldn't be passionate? Of course not, because without passion, nothing worthwhile would be accomplished. But what it says to me is I have to have an awareness, a sensitivity to when my passions and prejudices are starting to intrude upon the rights and enjoyment of others. If we were in person, I would be walking in front of one of you and kind of getting in your face, and you would physically recoil to demonstrate this. And I have to have that sensitivity that when I see it, it's affecting you in an unintended way, to back away, to back off. The difficulty in today's world, of course, is we all hide behind the anonymity of a keyboard. And we don't see that reaction, or we don't care about it. And this, by the way, at the beginning of the pandemic, actually, I beg your pardon, long before that, I joined, the virtual lodge. What was it called? I guess it was called the Internet Lodge out of UK. I wanted to see if Freemasonry, this was long before the pandemic, actually. I wanted to see if Freemasonry could be practiced that way. Secret, it can't. There are so many times that I walk into a lodge and what do we say every time? What's the one thing we say whenever we encounter somebody? Somebody pipe in for me. How are you? Right? It's our throwaway line. How are you? And what do they say inevitably? I'm fine. Do they mean it? If you're in person with them, you can tell that. You know, Denise, I hear you, but I'm looking at you. I'm not convinced you're feeling so fine. How are you really? Can't do that behind the anonymity of a screen, even in Hollywood squares like we have here. By the way, you ever want to test this? Next time somebody asks, how are you? Tell them, I'm lousy. You know what they're going to say? Oh, good, so am I. Because it's just throwaway lines. It's meaningless. I'm a naturally curious person. I love to live vicariously through other people. So inevitably, when I go into an institution, a restaurant, a store, a business of any kind, I don't care who I'm talking to first. I'll ask them, how's business? And boy, is it interesting how, I don't care whether it's the counter worker to the owner, they love to open up about it. And you learn so much about them and the business and the industry, and it's fascinating too. But boy, did I digress there. That the circle is designed to keep our passions and prejudices to where they don't interfere with somebody else. The next thing that we have on this is the two parallel perpendicular lines, which are said to represent what? Our patron saints of Masonry, St. John the Baptist, St. John the Evangelist. And it's supposed to conjure up their teachings when we see this symbol. Well, when I walk into the lodge and see this, those two lines also represent to me my Masonic mentors. The men who have guided me and frankly continue to guide me to this day. Let me tell you a quick story about Worshipful Jack Joe of precious memory. I became a Master Mason in May of 1992. Went home, my wife asked, how was it? I said, oh, it was great. And guess what? I'm an officer, I'm junior steward. She says, do you have any idea what that means? I said, none. She says, well, I do, and you're in deep trouble. She wasn't wrong. Well, from that night, every meeting since then, at the end of it, Worshipful Jack would come up to me, put his arm around me, and proceed to tell me what I had done wrong. Fast forward to 3.5 years later, it's now December 1996, and I've just completed my term as Master of the Lodge. And I finally, after 12 meetings sitting in the East, nailed it. I remember to do everything right and in proper order. And I was determined I was going to get out of that lodge room before Jack could rain on my parade. So I gavel the lodge closed, I remove my collar, I remove my apron, and I make a beeline for the door. California, our altars are in the middle of the lodge room. And for an old guy, Jack was pretty darn quick because I get right past the altar. Here he is, puts his arm around me, and I cock my arm. I'm going to give it to him right in the gut. How dare you? Fortunately, something stopped me because I realized that while I thought I was at the peak of my Masonic career, I can now sit on the sidelines and have all the answers along with the rest of the past masters. Jack realized I had a lot of growth and maturing to do. And he never gave up on me. Jack's been gone a lot of years now, but he still lives in my heart. And his messages to me still guide me to this day. By the way, did anybody else know what Jack was telling me? For all they knew, he was saying, let's go for a glass of iced tea afterwards, right? Because what Jack did really, really well is he publicly praised people, and not false praise, legitimate praise. And he privately admonished me, and I assume others, of our errors, and gently whispered good counsel in my ear. That to me is what mentorship is about. And I think all too often we're afraid to mentor. If you take nothing out of this, what I hope you'll do is recognize that none of us are here of our own volition. We have all had the benefit of standing on the shoulders of giants who preceded us. Who are we going to take and put on our shoulders? Who are we going to guide? Now, there are two kinds of mentorship in my mind. The first is the intentional mentorship, the one we're most familiar with. And this is where somebody, typically somebody younger, appreciates how you do something, oftentimes a trade. And they ask us if we will take them under our wing and show them how to do things. And you agree to, and you say, watch me, and then you do it, I'll watch you, and I'll correct you. The second type of mentorship is what I call the incidental or accidental mentorship, where you may not even realize somebody's watching you. This is the more dangerous one. This is the one we have to be aware of every waking moment, especially with the young people in our lives. These are the people that are looking to see if our actions coincide with our words. You ever want proof that our actions speak so much louder than our words? Just watch a young driver. You have that 15 or 16-year-old in your household who's anxious to start driving. I should say 20 or 25-year-old because kids don't want to drive anymore. And who can blame them? But all the time you've been telling them, never, ever what? Don't ever text and drive. However, when they get in the car with you, you're driving and you hop on your phone and you start texting, everything you've told them over the years is out the window because they will do what you show them much more than what you ever tell them. So I ask you, are we exemplifying the kind of behavior that we want others to emulate? I think this is something that we've got to be mindful of. And again, as we go out in a community with these concepts, they don't have to know this is Masonic in nature. We can share the same attitude of mentorship with them. Back to the symbol now. We know it's not complete, of course, until it's surmounted by the volume of the sacred law. And here with the symbol of the circle from the compasses, our Masonic mentors, along with the patron saints of Masonry, and with our divine guidance, we cannot materially err. A powerful, powerful symbol to me. I assume most of you have led one organization or another. Perhaps it's your Masonic Lodge, perhaps it's a civic group, a business, or what have you. And if you're like me, you like to have unanimity in decisions. It just makes it so much more efficient. If everybody says, yes, we vote, we go on to the next issue. It doesn't even have to be unanimous. If it's a majority and enough to move on, we're good. Here's another mindset difference I'd like to suggest you have. We can learn a lot from dissent. Now, I'm not talking about the person who just likes to just, say no for the sake of saying no, but the person who really has that nagging feeling in their gut about a decision we are close to making. The more we give that air and voice, the better decisions we're likely to be able to make. So I want us not to shun dissent, but rather to encourage it. And when I'm sharing some kind of organization, before a major decision, I will oftentimes do a straw vote, non-binding vote. And if there's somebody who doesn't agree with the direction we're taking, I will ask them if they're willing to share why. I don't care about the people who all agree, we know why. But chances are that person's seeing this from a point of view that the rest of us are not. And by airing that, we can address it and hopefully make a better decision. So let us honor dissent. And by doing so, it'll help us to prevent from suffering from those potential blind spots. It may not seem as efficient as just moving along, but it will be more efficient in the long run. Alrighty, we started this effort, as I said, in 2014. Besides forming the definition for civility, we also built a civility toolbox. If you can kind of picture this as that snap-on or Craftsman tool chest that you might have in the garage, where depending on what kind of project you're working on, you'll open that drawer that contains those tools for that project, whether it's working on the car or something around the house or what have you. Same type of thing with this toolbox. The idea here is if you're encountering incivility in your home life, in your community, in your house of worship, in your work life, wherever, there are certain drawers that you can open and pull out the tools there. over 1,000 tools there. We developed this in conjunction with the National Civility Center, and you'll see the tagline, the URL there. I'm going to share with you some of those tools as we move along here. And some of those tools, by the way, were developed by our California Masonic Center for Youth and Families in dealing in particular with family incivility and problems. So I encourage you to go look at that. Now, we all can agree, I think, that diversity is a good thing. A silly example of it is if I had to eat the same meal morning, noon, and night 7 days a week, I would not want to eat anymore. But just putting people with different thoughts, different backgrounds, different beliefs, and different desires in a room and say, okay, now go do great things isn't going to work. In fact, it's going to be an unmitigated disaster. So there are 3 steps that we have to do, I think, to make diversity truly beneficial. The first is we have to seek to understand people who are different from ourselves. Now, notice I said seek, not stand back along the wall and wait for people to share what's important to them, but to be genuinely curious about them. One of my 3 professions is that of a financial advisor. Basically, I get paid to be nosy. I get to learn where their greatest fears are, where their greatest hopes are, what they want to accomplish for their children, and so on. And that to me is the reward, getting to really know people that way. So we have to first seek to understand one another. From that point, we get to the point where we accept one another for our differences. Now, if we stop here, that's going from darkness to light, perhaps, but it's not getting to true enlightenment. Because just getting the point where, Luis, I know you're different than me and we'll get along, that's kind of just tolerance, isn't it? And again, not true enlightenment. We have to get to that stage, but then we need to get to the next stage, in my opinion, which is get to the point where we appreciate each other for our differences. We're taught about how the building of King Solomon's temple happened. And it happened with 153,303 people. How many of those were leaders? Okay, for our Masonic legend, 3 Grand Masters directed everything. And then we had the Master Masons working, and then the Fellowcraft Masons, and then the entered apprentices, the hewers, and the workmen in the quarries. We need that worker every bit as much as we need the leader. And I think one of the problems we get into in Masonry is we assume that everybody who walks through our door is cut out to be a leader. We need to honor that worker just as much as we do the leader, because without them, nothing would ever get accomplished. So let's figure out what each of us appreciates doing the most, what we're the best at, what we're trained for and educated to do. And then let's figure out who can be put into the best spot to, again, accomplish greater good. Those of you that have had the ability to attend our Grand Lodge building in San Francisco, the first thing you notice when you walk into this lobby, whether it's daytime and it's backlit from the sunshine or nighttime with lighting, is this beautiful Mosaic. And it tells the story of Freemasonry in California over the decades. If you get up close to it, you'll notice it's made up of broken glass, seed and dirt and leaves and so on. Things that in and of themselves have no value whatsoever. But when you put it all together, it creates a beautiful mosaic. And I'll suggest to you that this is society. Each of us is different. And by and of ourselves on our own, we can't accomplish that much. But when we all put ourselves together, boy, can we accomplish absolutely everything. Former President Jimmy Carter, who of course just lost his wife last week or so, said it really well. We become not a melting pot, but a beautiful mosaic. Different people, different beliefs, different yearnings, different hopes, and different dreams. So I hope that sheds a different light on diversity. And yes, while we welcome it, it's going to take some effort to make it productive. Now, the beauty of what I'm talking with you about is that I'm not asking you to change who you are. Who you are is pretty well cast in stone, but we can make simple changes to help to improve how we interact with each other. Some of these are incredibly simple, doesn't mean easy, but incredibly simple. Have you ever been with somebody and you're sharing a story with them and you're excited about it and they're sharing that excitement with you and they say yes, comma, but. And what happens to you in that instant? Your wall of defense goes up. Oh goodness, here it comes. Now they're going to blast me. They're going to shoot me down, which by the way, may not be the case, but that's what happens in your mind instantaneously. And by the way, we all do this, especially if we have children in our lives. And if we can change that yes, but to yes, and, it changes the entire conversation. Think about it. Yes. And Denise, did you also consider this? Now we're building on it together. And that, after all, as Masons, is what we are here to do, right? So yes, but, change it to yes, and. Very, very easy tool to improve your conversations. I'm going to share with you how we have organized our efforts. We realized back, 4 years ago now, about this time of year, that our efforts were becoming far-reaching. And we're raising money for this, and we're doing that, and so on. And so we formed the Worldwide Civility Council. And this is a group of Masons and non-Masons who oversees all of our efforts. We started by creating the Masonic Family Civility Project that has since morphed into the Masonic Civility Committee. This is now sanctioned through the Conference of Grand Masters of North America, and it is what's going to survive, this when I'm no longer around. One of the first things that we did after that was we held the Urgency of Civility Conference. We held this at the George Washington Masonic National Memorial there in Alexandria, Virginia in 2019. We brought together about, I think it was 80 people at that time from 25 different organizations. And we spearheaded how they could all work together to be more effective. Because until then, they were running around doing all kinds of things in silos and not accomplishing much. And a lot of good has come out of that. One of the things that came out of it is the certified civil. And the idea behind that is your lodge, your jurisdiction, your company, and now even you as an individual can become certified civil. And what this means is that one of my three professions is that of a law firm. So it's certified civil. And this tells my clients, opposing counsel, my vendors, my coworkers, everybody with whom I come in contact, that they can expect to be treated in a dignified manner. And if they ever feel I missed the mark on it, they can lodge what's called a civility concern with who? With the Worldwide Civility Council. And rather than slap me over the hand and say, how dare you, they'll come to me and say, Russ, you had this dealing with Eric, and he didn't feel like you treated him the way he deserved to be. How can we rectify it? How can we repair the relationship? So it's doing a couple of things. It's holding me accountable. I've got, it's on my email, it's on my window when they come into my lobby. And it's reminding me that I always need to be held up to that higher standard. And the other thing it's doing is if I miss the mark, which I'm going to on occasion, gives me the chance to rectify it, to save that relationship. I may not have even realized I had treated her that way. Give me the chance to make it right. So I encourage you to go to certifiedscivil.com or .org for that matter, and check it out, see if it's appropriate for you. We also developed the civility scorecard. The idea here is you can paste into it transcript of speech and compare the relative level of civility to other speeches if you want. We're working feverishly to make this so that it can take oral speech and in real time convert it to a civility score. I want this, especially during election debates, to have that little crawl at the bottom of the screen and show who's more civil and who's less. Not, again, to beat anybody up with it, but to hopefully encourage those who are seeking our vote to treat their fellow candidates and us, the voting populace, with greater respect, so that we can learn what they plan to do to us and for us instead of just the rhetoric. Frankly, we've taken a little bit of back seat with this because AI is changing so rapidly. We just don't know where to take it from here. We also have the Civility shop. We've got some cool swag there. I encourage you to go on there, see if anything. It's perfect holiday shopping for you, and it helps to fund our efforts. But our biggest programs are those of the Civility Ambassador. And here we have two, the Masonic Civility Ambassador, which is civilityambassadors.org, and the Community Civility Ambassador, which is civilityambassadors.com. And I'll talk more about that as we move along here. All righty, so let me now talk to you about the 3 Ds of communication. The first D is debate. What is a debate? Anybody have any thoughts? A debate is where you're given a subject and you're to argue your side of it, your position on it. Have any of you ever participated on a debate team? There's certain rules you have to abide by, or else you've as good as lost the debate. And one of those is you can never, ever waver your position. Well, gee, Eric, I hadn't thought of it that way. It's a really good point. Boy, as soon as I said that, I've just lost the debate. And I think we can all see times and places where debating makes sense. By the way, here in the US, we're going through, the presidential cycle right now. We're seeing debates on TV. Those are not legitimate debates. Those are made for TV, reality TV, if you will. And if you ever want proof of this, next time you're watching a debate on TV, close your eyes, listen to the question the moderator asked, and then listen to the response the candidate gave, and it's going to be night and day. It's not going to mesh because they're spending days and weeks before just rehearsing how they're going to get their 30-second soundbite in. But there are, again, times and places where debates make sense. The second D is a deliberation. Deliberation is where we have a problem. It's a complex problem where the answer is not readily apparent. So we're going to gather the people with the expertise, the education, the understanding of the subject matter. And the first thing they're going to do when they get in the room is probably try to define the true problem, the root of it. Because often what we think is the problem is just the tip of the iceberg and we need to get deeper. They are then going to brainstorm possible solutions and to the best of their ability, identify advantages and disadvantages to each solution. And also to try to identify potential unintended consequences of implementing this. I'll take you back to the United States during the beginning of COVID. They felt, our legislators felt they needed to shut down the economy to keep the spread from getting worse and totally overwhelming our hospitals and our healthcare system. So what did they do? They paid people to stay home. Well, that was fine and dandy until we needed to get people back to work, and it was safe to get back to work. But some people were making more by sitting on their couches than they were by working. This is the concept anyway. Whether that's proven or not is another story. But my point is, if Congress had gone that extra step to say, boy, are we creating a system where we could be incentivizing people not to work, they may have come up with a different solution or modified it. The purpose of a deliberation is to find that answer that the group thinks is the best course forward. And when they walk out, they're going to walk out in consensus. Does that mean it's unanimous? No, not necessarily. But it does mean the group has agreed to speak with one unified voice. And I'll submit to you, this is how our Masonic lodges are supposed to function. Supposed to. They don't always. But when they do, they function well because they use the deliberative method of governance and discussion. Anybody guess what the third D is? Dialogue. Well, what is dialogue? In its most basic sense, what is dialogue? Anybody have any ideas? Help me out here.
Two people. Communication.
Communication between two people. Get even more basic than that for me, Josh. Two people in dialogue, which means one is speaking and the other one is hearing.
Right.
Okay. That's all it is. It's not about finding solutions like a deliberation. It's not about winning or losing as in a debate. It's merely about speaking and hearing. And we are all really, really good at this. How do I know? Because you do it literally millions of times every day. It's so easy. We do it without any conscious thinking. It's easy, that is, until what? We're not seeing eye to eye. That's when dialogue breaks down and results in tension at best and ruins relationships at worst. So we need to learn how to engage in civil dialogue. By the way, we need to decide what kind of person we're going to be before temptation ever tries to drag us away from that. As a financial advisor, I cannot tell you how many times I have people ask me, do I make this check payable to you? Well, I don't need to have 2 commas in there in the number of the amount of the check they're going to write before I decide I'm never, ever, ever going to embezzle from a client. I have to have decided that's the kind of person I'm going to be before that temptation arises. Just like loyalty to my spouse. I can't decide when some beautiful, attractive person starts hitting on me that I'm going to be loyal to her, which isn't a problem because it doesn't happen. But I have to decide that from the outset of our relationship. Same thing with engaging in civil dialogue. We cannot wait for the heat of the moment when our emotions are raw and boiling to decide how we're going to handle this. We have to literally practice it ahead of time. So we do this through what we call the civil dialogue method. Now, this was formed by the folks at the Arizona State University Hugh Downs School of Human Communication. In fact, they've written a book on it, and the subtitle is Hot Topics Cool Heads. So the way this works is you frame a statement that is likely to get a lot of people saying, yep, that's absolutely true, or oh my goodness, that's the worst idea in the world. To really get the hair on the back of people's neck up. And then you have in front of the audience 5 chairs arranged in the shape of a horseshoe, ranging from strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, undecided, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. And after reading the statement, the facilitator shares some fact about it, some background about the statement. And then the facilitator asks for volunteers. By the way, I love doing this with young people. I love doing it with a combination of younger and older people. And it's interesting to me when it's younger people, I have to warn them, wait until I read the question, the statement, not a question, the statement. And please, only 1 butt per seat, because they come running down, they want to take a part in it before they even know what they're getting into. Adults, on the other hand, take a little warming up to it because we're just so much more reserved than younger people tend to be. So let me give you an example of a statement. In the non-Masonic world, I'll often use the Electoral College in its current state should be abandoned. Again, notice it's a statement, not a question. And I'll explain the history of the Electoral College, why it was established, why some people think it's outlasted its purpose. And then I'll ask for volunteers to come and take a position. In the Masonic realm, I love to use this one. Freemasonry should sponsor a youth order that is open to people of all genders. And again, in many jurisdictions, we have Job's Daughters, Rainbow for Girls, DMLA for boys. And an argument can be made that, it's good for girls to be around other girls and adult leaders it's a safe place for them. Same thing with boys. And there's other ways that they can intermix through school and sports and so on. And then, there are other people that think, no, this is the perfect environment to have boys and girls to come together again in that safe environment with the Masonic values guiding them. And guess what? Not everybody identifies as purely male or purely it would be nice to have a welcoming organization for them. And you can imagine how this just gets the hair on people's necks going. Oh my, what are you, nuts? There's only girls, there's only boys, there's only one organization appropriate for them, or, so they populate these seats, and then the facilitator shares these ground rules with them. By the way, I want you to really take note of these, because this works whether you're in a formal civil dialogue exercise like this, whether you're in any other kind of group, be it a small or a large group, or even in your individual one-on-one conversations. So the first rule that we ask all of the participants to abide by is, please be passionate, but do it without being hostile towards your other panelists. Again, keep your passions and prejudices within those due bounds. And one way we do this is by focusing on how the statement makes us feel. If we could talk about our feelings and so on, that will help to reduce the temperature oftentimes. Use truthful speech that's not attacking. And one of the ways we do this, and again, it's a little tweak, instead of it being you, well, Lynn, you think, use I language. Well, I think, I feel, I believe. Because I can't speak to Lynn's truth. I have no idea where she comes from. The only truth from which I can speak is my own. So changing you to I will absolutely improve your relationships and your conversations. I promise you. It's okay to disagree, but do it without demonizing the other person. And then one of the hardest things in the world for me to do is to engage in active listening. What is active listening? Well, it's all about being engaged with the other person and letting them know it. There are a few ways we do this. Number one is we don't allow ourselves to formulate our response while the other person is talking. We all do this. We have to habitualize ourselves to this. The problem with formulating your response before they stop talking is the human brain is capable of doing exactly one thing at a time. And as soon as you start doing that, you shut down listening to the other person. Now, there's a risk to not formulating your response, and that is you may forget what you were going to say. To which I say it probably wasn't that important in the first place. If it was, you would probably remember it. Don't engage in false listening. And then something that's really valuable is reframing what you thought you heard the person say. Do it in your own words. You know what, Christine, if I'm hearing you correctly, this is what you're meaning or what you're asking. And this accomplishes two things. Number one, it allows the person to clarify a misunderstanding you have. Have you ever been in that knockdown, drag-out argument where hours later, days later, even years later, you figure out it was over a stupid, silly misunderstanding? Wouldn't it have been great to have identified that early on and again preserve the relationship? So that's the first benefit of reframing. The second one is it shows the person that you're listening to them. We also do that by nodding, by leaning in, by backing away. And we also have to be cautious of our body language. What am I telling you when I fold my arms? I'm telling you I'm shutting you down. I'm better than you. Really what maybe is my back just needs to be stretched, but it conveys a message that I may not be intending to do. These are all ways of engaging in active listening. Now, another important thing about this is that before this session, the facilitator has identified somebody in the audience who has access to the internet through their cell phone, and they become the information source. We used to call this the fact checker, but we changed it to information source, and I think you can see the difference there. And this is the person who's going to be called upon if somebody in the audience states something as fact. Josh, I'm going to say this just for you. We all know that 68.7% of all facts are made up on this, all statistics are made up on the spot. Okay. Somebody on the panel says, you know what, I don't think it's quite that high. I think it's 62.3%. Okay. That line of conversation will halt until the information source can prove or disprove it. Rarely, by the way, does this person ever get called upon. But just the mere knowledge that they're there changes how we talk. Instead of saying 68.7% of all statistics are made up on the spot, I might say, you know, as I understand it, the majority of all statistics are made up. Okay. I didn't draw that line in the sand because the problem with drawing that line in the sand is it's hard to then back away from it. Which leads me to something else, and that is we need to be graceful when somebody is in error, when somebody makes a mistake. We're in this society where it's all about gotcha. You screwed up, I caught you. And that's not a healthy society. And I see this with spouses all the time. I see it with coworkers. Does it really matter whether it happened on Tuesday or Wednesday of last week? And guess what? More often than not, I'm going to be wrong. So I want to grant that grace to the other person when they are wrong. Hopefully I can receive that back when I screw up, which is plenty. These are the ground rules of civility. You use them in the civil dialogue exercise. But again, I'd like you to start to practice them in your everyday conversations with people. And I promise it will change your relationships with them for the better, for the better. Cleo, am I good for another 15 minutes or so? Or
Yep,
Josh?
It's your world. Do what you got to do.
Okay. I
We're here to
can't, well,
learn. We're here to learn.
I can't tell how many are dozing off, but
No,
if you are, I hope you're having a good sleep.
no, fully paying attention.
Here's another tool I want to share with you that we developed here in California. And I love it. And again, this can be taken outside of the lodge room. But on a big floor, carpeting or whatever, you take masking tape, painter's tape, and you tape out this wheel that we call Solomon's wheel. And you take the three principal tenets of Freemasonry, brotherly love, relief, and truth, and the four cardinal virtues, temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice, and you put them randomly in one of the spokes. And if you drew the circle properly, you have a blank here because there should be 8 versus 3 plus 4 is only 7. And that's by design here. Well, maybe it wasn't by design, but we had to make it work, so we did. So you put these, you literally write them down. I've laminated them. I throw them in each wedge of the pie here. And then you have your participants come and stand in a particular wedge. And you have them contemplate for some time what that is saying to them at the moment. And then you have them walk Solomon's wheel. Go stand in the one next to it. If you have a lot of people, make sure they go in the same direction. Doesn't matter which way, but that way they don't go running into each other. When they have all made the circuit, ask them to then stand in the one that is speaking to them the most at this time. And then what you do is you have the people in that particular wedge act out what that is saying to them without using their words. Any idea why we want them to do it without using their words? We can all spout off the Webster's Dictionary definition of each of these. But when we have to use our actions, our hands, and our facial expressions and so on to demonstrate it, it sinks in more. It becomes more potent, more powerful. And then the next part of this, and this is where you ask people to promise that what happens in Solomon's wheel stays here, because this can get emotional for folks. Because the next thing you do is you ask them to go and stand in the wedge where they feel they need the most development, where they want to work on the most. And we have had people standing there and literally breaking down crying. And afterwards going, or not even afterwards, during, going up to somebody in the wheel with them and apologizing to them for how they had wronged them in the past. It's incredibly, incredibly powerful. By the way, I've had people try to play like Twister and stand in multiple ones. I've had others stand in the middle and say all of them. But it's a way that we can take our Masonic teachings and live them even more thoroughly and more consistently. I have a picture of Solomon's wheel on my desk at the office. And when I have a situation where the answer is not readily apparent to me, I'll close my eyes, and I don't know whether it's for 30 seconds or 3 minutes or what, but I'm mentally walking Solomon's wheel in my mind. And generally when I do that, the answer becomes apparent to me. Very, very powerful tool. So I'd encourage you to adopt this. Can we share this outside the four walls of our lodge? Absolutely. Instead of brotherly love, we call it, love. Okay. It's powerful. I hope you'll use it. So let's start wrapping this up. What can we as individuals do? Well, number one, I hope I've created an awareness of what we can do, that you now have a greater awareness that you now have than you did an hour or so ago. I hope you'll be able to use what we talked about today to identify opportunities to share the concept and then do that. All of this information is available to you on MasonicCivility.org. You'll see the website there, MasonicCivility.org. These PowerPoint presentations there, you can download them, you can tweak them, you can, delete slides, whatever you want to do. No pride of authorship on all this. We just want the message shared because we think that's how we're going to make differences. Always be cognizant of your own behavior. And are you exemplifying what you want others to emulate? Support the civilityshop.org as you see appropriate, and consider applying for the Certified Civil designation. As I mentioned earlier, we have two brands, if you will, of the Civility Ambassadors. The Community Civility Ambassadors are .com, Masonic Civility Ambassadors are .org. The specific role of the ambassador is to serve as the liaison between our efforts and your grand jurisdiction, to share information with other concerned individuals and organizations that we develop, share anecdotes, successes, and failures with us. Let's all learn from one another. Help us to build our core of ambassadors, and then help us as we organize other gatherings with other civility organizations. And then something else that we're doing with some good success is we're organizing what we call dinner and a fight, crossing out fight, and making it dialogue. It's taking that civil dialogue that I said before, but doing it around a dinner. So you could do this with your lodge or community or strangers or what have you. And what you do is you bring them all in, you serve them dinner, you have icebreakers so that you have the 6 people at each table getting to know each other. By the way, it's best if they're all strangers from each other. And then you have that, after they've eaten, you have that civil dialogue with the 5 volunteers to participate in it. And then after dinner, over dessert, they come back together as a table and they talk about what they've learned. And then we also have them take what we call a deeper dive. I told you earlier that dialogue is not about finding solutions. And yet solutions oftentimes will come out of this dialogue, which I think is pretty intuitive. And so the group of people that wants to can agree to meet later and start mapping out how they might address that particular problem or situation. So look to sponsor a dinner and a fight / dialogue. And then here's my biggest goal for our ambassadors. And that is that they have a sensitivity and they're well-trained to keep an ear to the ground for when a situation is starting to bubble up under the surface and threaten to tear their community apart. After George Floyd, here in my city of 110,000 people in Southern California, we're a mission town. So we're one of the missions, the towns that were formed by missionaries. And in front of City Hall, high up on the hill, there was this bronze statue of Padre Serra, who led the missions at the time. And I'll tell you, none of us thought much of it. Okay, that's our identity as a city. Well, after George Floyd, it started coming out that guess what? The missionaries were not terribly pleasant or nice to the indigenous people. And so there was a lot of discussion going on in our city about, is it appropriate to still, objectify that person and that type of person? And our city council had held 3 nights worth of public comments, 50 people a night, given 3 minutes to vocalize their thoughts. And I tuned in for about 20 minutes. I couldn't handle it anymore. But this really was starting to tear my community apart. Well, what was the upshot of it? At 2 a.m. one night, the city went in, they had a crane, they took it down, they moved it into the museum. We all woke up the next morning, it was gone. I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't invite the community to have civil dialogues about that situation. By the way, the biggest thing to tear apart my community over the last 20 years, I kid you not when I say this, was should we build a super Walmart on Victoria Avenue? There are family members to this day who will not talk to each other, best friends who are no longer, because of that one issue. It was either going to add all kinds of traffic, they use Chinese slave labor and so on and so forth, or it creates great buying opportunities, lowers our price, creates jobs. Nobody was on the fence with it, it seemed. And yet relationships are ruined over that one decision. So my point of all this is we want our civility ambassadors to keep their ear to the ground. And when they're starting to sense that kind of thing is threatening their community, be it work, be it their broader community, be it their lodge, whatever, let's consider doing a civil dialogue in there and preserve those relationships. By the way, Masons aren't perfect, and therefore our Masonic lodges have a lot of faults. I have been asked to come into many, many lodges over the years and share these concepts to help them to come back together and practice Freemasonry. And I think our group has saved many, many lodges. Not because we're magicians, not because have any special talents, but just sharing these concepts with them. All right, here's my cheap, shameless plug. I had been told for years to write a book. I don't know if any of you are authors, but there's nothing to it, right? Well, nonsense. I spent 6 years it looked like the dog got sick on the paper, frankly. I had all these, what I thought were great ideas, but nothing that could translate into a book. I finally sat down, you read things on how to write a book. They tell you, spend an hour a day doing it. So I'd get up early in there every morning, as I usually do, and I'd sit down and do it. And eventually I pounded out what I thought was the first chapter and then couldn't get beyond that. And it wasn't until I found Michael Ashley here in Southern California, who is a professional writer. So all the good parts of it are his, all the lousy parts are mine. But we pounded it out and we met each other the week before the shutdown for COVID. And so we'd actually had appointments. He was about 2 hours away from me. We had a meeting to get together. We converted it all to Zoom and we wrote it on Google Docs, which was an incredible experience. We'd carve out half a day at a time. We spent months and months coming out with the outline, which looked nothing like I envisioned this book would. And then we would write it together. And then, we'd individually write and we'd interrupt each other. Come look at this. And it was a neat experience. And apparently that is how he is co-writing to this day. Never thought I'd write a book that way. But the idea here is it takes the reader on their own personal Masonic journey. Instead of telling me what you need to do, it has exercises at the end of each chapter where if you're one of those that writes in a book, you can do it that way, or you can do it on an app or on an app. And it leads you to what you're going to change in yourself to become a more civil person. Please, if you decide to read it, get through the first chapter, because if you stop there, you're going to think there's absolutely no hope. You get through the final chapter, that is where there is hope. For one of those that prefers to do it on Kindle or Audible, it's available that way. So I want to thank you for your time today. What I ask of you is that you take the lessons that I've shared with you and that you've gleaned from today, and that you allow yourself to be that proverbial pebble, to be dropped into the placid waters of complacency, and allow the ripples of your words, your actions, your deeds to spread to the far shores to bring about change, so that we can all begin to repair the world and restore civility to society. Again, I thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Brother Russ, for taking time out today to be with us and give us this wonderful lecture and presentation. I'm going to open the floor for questions. And I do have a question to start off. How do you encourage early and ongoing education?
I have a dear friend who's a middle school teacher here in town, and she has brought me into her sixth, seventh, and eighth grade classes once a year. I have found that sixth grade is too young for this. And our gate, if you're familiar with that phrase, or upper level seventh grade and eighth grade, is just the ideal times to be talking with them about it. So these exact same concepts can be shared with that grade level and higher, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. The lower grade levels, what I have found effective is to empower them, to give them agency over their thoughts and opinions. And, I don't want to create, kids who go, talking back to mom and dad by any stretch. But I also want to help them to empower them that if they see something going on that they don't think is right, to say something and to give them the tools to do so. So concepts that I have used with younger folks is, I appreciate how you're feeling. What is another way that you can think of to say that? And notice I just caught myself. I started to say, can you think of another way to say that? Because you don't want to do that. That's closed end. They're saying no. What other way do you think of that you can say that may not hurt the other person? Things like that. Age appropriate, trying to get them to think differently. By the way, now I think the third time I've mentioned this, and I'm not doing it because I'm speaking business, but I'm a financial advisor. And why was I just going to say that? Oh, one of the things I've learned over the time is that it is really difficult to get adults to change their habits with money. Why is that? Well, psychologists have told me that we form our habits by the time we're 8 years old, including with money. I'm going to demonstrate this. If you put your hands together like this, please. Clasp your hands together. Okay. Now move a finger up or down. Change your position. How does that feel? Not so good, right? Odd. And I see some of you done it. You've already gone back to the way you were. You didn't think about how you're clasping your hands. You've done that all your life. It's natural. But boy, when I rocked your boat a little bit, I don't like this. I'm hoping I rocked your boat a little bit today. I'm hoping I made you a little uncomfortable. And that's frankly what my book, The Civility Mosaic, is designed to do. The one guarantee I'll make you is that it will tick you off at some place or another. It's an equal opportunity ticker offer. Why? Because when we are in an uncomfortable position, that's when we're more open to hearing things instead of the way we want to hear them. And that's a requirement for change. We have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and susceptible to new ways of doing things. And that's what this is, the yes, but, the yes, and. The I statements versus the you statements. It's forming those new habits that we formed since we've been 8 years old. And most of us are a little older than that. Did I answer your question, Cleo?
Yes, but I also want to know as far as with our Masonic family.
Great question. Thank you. The first thing I think we all ought to do, if you have the square and compasses on the back of your car, scrape it off and put it on the dashboard. We don't need to tell the person behind us that we're Masons. We need to tell ourselves all the times that we're Masons. So put it there to remind you how to drive. And I say that because I think that's what we need to do with inside the lodge. Now, we have to be careful. Our egos are all fragile. And I'm not telling you to play games by any stretch, but I think we need to, what did I tell you Worshipful Jack Joe would do with me? Put his arm around me, take me aside, and try to tell me where I had erred. We need to privately admonish in a Masonic way and publicly praise where praise is worthy. Okay? When we aren't able to do that, or it hasn't been successful, then I think we need to get, I'm going to use this phrase, I don't know that I mean it this way, but the offenders together, the people who are having the issue together. And that's where I facilitate, and I hope all of you can facilitate. I like to have these sessions inside the lodge room, and I put the chairs in a circle, so there is no lead. I don't want the master sitting at the front and everybody, we're on the level. By the way, is this a concept worthy outside the lodge room? We treat each other as though we're on the level with equal voice, okay? And the first thing that I'll do in that instance, and I hope I'm going where you want me going, is set the ground rules. Guess which ground rules I use? The ones I just shared with you, okay? And, only one person speak at a time. Please wait and I'll call on you. And, engage in active listening, all those kinds of ground rules. There's one more really important one I share with them. I ask permission that if the conversation is going off track, getting repetitive, no longer productive, that I can pull the conversation back. I do this when I mentioned to you 3 careers. My 3rd career is that of a mediator, okay? And I start my mediations this way. And what this has the ability to do is when somebody is repeating themselves, chasing that rabbit, or getting nasty, I go, hang on a minute, gave me permission to pull the conversation back. And oftentimes they'll self-police. Oh, I did it, sorry. And they'll come back to it. So I do this in that kind of environment as well. And then I ask, depending, sometimes I'll say, okay, what are we doing well as a lodge? And then where do we have opportunities to improve? I don't want to do a SWOT analysis or anything like that formal. What I'm trying to do is get the root of the problem as quickly as I can to get it out there. But I don't want to come and just drop it in the center of the circle. Why? Because I may be wrong. They're probably wrong when they're telling me what the problem is. We need to be able to get to the core so we can then engage in what? And deliberation to try to resolve it, or at least civil dialogue about it. I don't have any interest in doing a debate about it, okay? And oftentimes what I'll be able to do is then, and I don't want these sessions, I'll schedule them for 90 minutes. And if, 75 minutes into it, we're making some progress, I'll ask permission to go for a total of 2 hours. I will never go in 2 hours. The tush just can't sit that long, okay? And be productive. Not that the tush is productive. The conversation can't be productive. Sorry. So that's how I'll handle those kinds of things. And oftentimes, if we're being somewhat successful, it'll require another visit or 2, and maybe some groundwork in the meantime in between visits. Sometimes, and I have told brothers, you know what? You shouldn't be in this lodge. You can't get out of your own way to allow the lodge to function. And that hurts to be able to say that. And I've got to believe it hurts to say it. But I've had many instances where they've gone off, joined another lodge, been productive in that other lodge, and the lodge they left is getting back to practicing good Freemasonry again.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my question. I would like to open the floor to others to participate and ask or, make comments. Anyone? I have
Lynn?
Josh, and then I have Lynn. Oh, no, not Josh, Lynn. Welcome, Sister Lynn.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Brother Russ, whether you've had any opportunity to apply all of your principles to our political members of society.
I've tried. I have not been very successful.
Oh, perfect.
We started this effort in 2014, trying to get our leaders from the top down to become more civil. And I abandoned that after 3 years, not I, we, because it was just an exercise in futility. That said, I'm going to show you something that I think is really, really cool. I'll try to keep talking while I'm doing this, but we need to, in my opinion, we need to change this to a grassroots effort. Oh, come on. Because we can't rely on I know what I'm doing wrong, on our elected officials to do it, but we have to demand it. We absolutely have to demand it. Come on. So what I am doing to that effect now is, you tell I'm table dancing here. Okay. We came up with these yard signs. If I can find it. Well, that didn't work worth a darn. They are yard signs. Oh, can you see it now? Am I sharing it now?
Yes.
You know, those H frames that, you plug it into your grass or your yard. And the QR code leads to our efforts. And it's just trying to say, vote accordingly. We're not telling you how to vote, but please, consider how you are voting. And we hope that will have a little more grassroots efforts. We had tried to engage with people like the Problem Solvers Caucus and, figure out what they're doing well, what they're not doing well. But here in the US, and by the way, this isn't eccentric, it's across the globe. Our representatives are not listening to us. And so we need to use the biggest sound megaphone we have, which is the power of our vote. By the way, this effort is worldwide. And, we would think Canada, for example, what problems with incivility do they have? My goodness, they are every bit as worried about it as Americans, as they are in Serbia and Mexico and, Israel and, all over the place. So short answer is we haven't had much success. We're really focusing our efforts on, I'm going to work on my own behavior and exemplify it, and then I'm going to demand it around people that I have influence. Josh.
I like the idea. Thank you.
You bet.
Sure. So I live in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and I spent 6 years or so as a Virginia Freemason, a regular Virginia Freemason. And I served in all the chairs. And when our worshipful master of our lodge passed away, I took the reins of our lodge. And when I had joined Masonry, I had talked about how I didn't think it was appropriate that I would be a part of an organization or society in which women were, in my view, treated as essentially second-class citizens, despite these very high-minded ideals of equality. And upon joining, I realized that there was other forms of discrimination. There were other forms of discrimination occurring, including against LGBTQ people. There's very active discrimination against trans people in Virginia, and more subtle, insidious, but certainly existing forms of anti-gay discrimination that are occurring. And so I sort of raised the flag on that. My background is in civil rights law enforcement. And I said, hey, we've got some problems here. And for my actions, I was retaliated against and, all but basically tossed out the door. And so now my goal these days is to establish a place in Masonry where that type of discrimination simply doesn't occur, and to work with Masons who are dedicated to confronting and dealing with that type of discrimination. And so my question for you is, I mean, what's the approach here to talk to the regular brothers and regular Masonry and communicate with regular Masonry when they've made it clear, at least where I am, that there's really no interest in having a conversation, that they think they've got all this right. And, you know, if you're going to talk about this among them, you're causing harmony and discord, when really I think the discord is created by not respecting human rights and treating people with the dignity that they're entitled as free and equal beings. Do we just, do we just have to politely and clearly state our position and do our own thing? Or is there a way to have more engagement with them? Just curious as to your thoughts on this, as maybe you've have experience trying to understand and work through discrimination as well.
Boy, have I. And I'll try to focus this because I can take this a lot of different directions. First of all, I shared with you the past Grand Master of that southern state that shall not be named, whose attitude was so abhorrent that I chose not to engage. That's one way. And the trouble with that is you haven't changed anything.
Right.
So, but we do have to choose what battles and what mountaintops we're going to fall on our swords on. Boy, did I mix my metaphors there. I'll give you another example, though. I was master in 1996, and one of my dear friends became we initiated him in our lodge. And Worshipful Bill Coy of blessed memory was 50 years my senior at the time. Very blue collar, didn't even have a high school education, but I loved this man. And during a break during the degree, he calls me over. I sit down next to him in the north, and he says, John here. Yeah, great degree so far, huh? He says, yeah, but I think he's a little what, Bill? I think he's a little, are you saying that you think he's gay? Yeah, I guess so. I said, as a matter of fact, he is. And isn't it great that that doesn't matter? And I can see he's a little uncomfortable. And I just get up and walk away. And after that, and including at the end of the degree, he went over and shook his hand, grabbed him in an embrace, and treated him well from then on. So in that one instance, I was able to have a little bit of impact. He probably never knew that he knew gay people before that. And he had to just see that John was a good human being. So we can make those kinds of impacts. There's one more real important point here. I'm going to take 2 minutes on it. As human beings, we have stayed alive through the millennia by instantaneously, subconsciously judging people and situations. That's what allows you, if somebody knocks on your door right now, you either flee to, run to them and give them an embrace, or you hit the deck because they're a danger to you. That's what's kept us alive through the millennia. I want us to flip that on its head. And instead of forming those instantaneous judgments and sticking to them no matter what, I want us to get to the point, break that habit of presuming decency in everybody we encounter. My wife and I have been married 31 years. We've had exactly one argument. And we didn't like it. And we decided, you know what, we're not going to do this again. And how we did it is by presuming that she would never hurt me. I would never do anything to hurt her. And when we're, having this, tension occurring, either I'm misunderstanding it, it's because I'm not in the right frame of mind, I'm hangry, whatever the case is, or vice versa. And allows us to work through it. Think about Freemasonry. I presume this is the case in your, well, no, it's not. Okay, California Masonry, quote, regular Masonry. We have them fill out the petition, and we ask them to profess a belief in a supreme being. That's really powerful to me. First of all, profess it. Do we ask them to prove it? No. We're going to take that person on their word. Has there ever been made an atheist been made a Mason in our lodges? Yes. But we have said we would rather err on occasion than presume nobody's telling the truth and they have to prove it to us and be wrong all the time. Okay. And then that belief in a supreme being, that to me is also equally powerful. We have what, 8 of us here. I guarantee we have 12 or 15 different beliefs in the supreme being. We honor those. You don't have to conform to my belief. What other part of our world is that the case? So getting back to you, Josh, here, I think, if we are encountering that, butting of heads, if we first of all presume decency in them and not assume, okay, they're a bigoted, son of a gun, that will allow us to then deal with them in a decent position, from a decent point of view, and see if we can better understand each other. Reserving the right to always say, nope, you're not worth my time and attention any longer. But even then, we bow out gracefully. That help? As he's walking from the car into the house.
It's interesting because even though there have been disagreements that have led to me leaving regular masonry, I haven't shut the door to any of those unless they've been specifically disrespectful or rude to me. And in fact, I still consider them my brothers, and many of them still consider me their brother. And I think that's important. Just because they're part of an organization that I think discriminates, I know that not all of them feel the same way, and that they have their own reasons for maintaining their membership, and that they're not bad people, even if they're taking part in something that I think is a harmful institution that needs reform.
I hear you completely. And guess what? I've wrestled with this. And I didn't know anything about masonry before I started dating my wife. And her father would schlep me to all this Masonic stuff. And I asked the question one day, Christine, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure indeed. But when I became a Mason and I learned that it is in fact a fraternity, I frankly poo-pooed it. And, I don't want to be a part of that. And then I realized that while I didn't think I needed a safe place to be around other fellows, I did, and I appreciate that. And it gives me a place to be able to be, in my professions and home, I have this feeling that I've always got to have the answers and be the provider and all that stuff. And guess what? Within the lodge, if it's the right lodge, I don't. I can be vulnerable. And I have to tell you, there have been times that I've been so upset with my lodge, that I've been so upset with California Freemasonry, that I've been so upset with North American Freemasonry, that I've thought of leaving it and joining the George Washington Union or some other such organization.
Come on over. We'd love to have you.
Haven't reached that point yet, because I still do get reward out of it.
Yeah.
I told you early on in my presentation, Masonry is far from perfect. Why? Because it's made up of fallible individuals. I'm making a dent. I think I'm hitting my head against other walls. Just like with civility, if I decided to keep doing this or stopping it based on the level of success I have had, I would have quit a long time ago. But boy, I'm determined to make this better for my children and my grandchildren. So, and boy, you're not flawed in your attitude and your thinking, in my opinion, Josh. I totally get where you're coming from and agree with it.
Are there any
Other
other
thoughts?
questions from the floor?
We
Jamila,
may have some
Louise?
Facebook friends. Any of those folks saying anything?
No, they're quiet.
Okay.
One person was watching and then they jumped off.
My dream, by the way, with certified civil, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Lynn, is that someday Mark Zuckerberg is again testifying before Congress, and he says, yes, Congresswoman, I know we still have problems, But look, a third of our people are certified civil, and I can show you how it's lowered the temperature.
Mm.
So if anybody can help me make that happen, I'd love to do it.
Jamila has her hand raised.
I do. And Brother Russ, I'd like, is it okay for me to have a conversation with you offline? You said something at the end, within the last few minutes that really, got under my skin.
I would welcome the opportunity, and I apologize for that.
Well, well, I don't know if you need to apologize. It was, you said that he didn't even have a high school education.
Thank you for calling me on that. That's not how I intended it to come out.
I know, but my dad was a master mason, and he lived to 102. And when he was in his 90s, he was in a program for geriatrics, and it was a study about, longevity. And they asked him, where'd he go to college? And he said he didn't. They asked him where he went to high school. He said he didn't. They called me because they could not believe that he was as well read and spoke as well as he did. So when he lived in Virginia, there wasn't even a Black high school that he could attend. So that started him in the wrong, direction. But my dad is not the only Freemason who does not have a high school education. Thomas Paine, who we all quote, did not have an education. In fact, he didn't even go to school in England when he could have. But he wrote the things that we as Freemasons and Americans still quote.
Well, dear.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for calling me on that. I try to have those sensitivities, and it did slip. I will tell you, I am a high school dropout. I left home at 16, made it for another year in high school, and was working 3 jobs, couldn't stay awake. I dropped out. So it's a sensitivity I generally have. I just blew it on that. I have utmost respect for self-made folks. So.
Yeah, my daughter, and I don't want to have this back and forth, but my daughter only has a GED, but she's finishing her master's program now.
Awesome.
her doctorate. So
Awesome.
Be careful.
I forgot.
You're right.
Jamila, also give your background too.
What?
Your past background.
About what?
Freemasonry, where you hailed from. Those kinds of things. Everybody's like, who is this lady talking?
Beautiful silhouette.
Because I was speaking there at the United Nations. I can't get my phone to undo the video.
Oh.
So that's why I'm like this. I'm past worshipful master of a lodge in New York City called
Stop laughing.
Universalist. No, it's Universalist. I'm laughing for another reason, which is a lodge under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Belgium, women.
Very good. Very good. To that end, I'm not trying to justify anything, but I tell people frequently I'm a JD with a high school dropout with a JD. So I have a lot of respect for that.
There you go. There you go.
Lynn?
Someone
else had their hand up. Was that Lynn?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes. I just wanted to add that I found, since I'm a relatively new Freemason, although I was the Job's daughter in my teens and went all the way through the line and did the honored queen thing. But now that I have basically returned to Freemasonry, I found that it is very educationally oriented. in terms of improving ourselves and, you know, challenging us. And I think that for a lot of us, I started out in junior college and, you know, worked my way through, but just always wanted to learn more. And so I think that's given Freemasonry's given me that outlet. But to get back to civility for just a moment, I think that within our society, what we're seeing is just kind of a breakdown in what was considered a societal norm. And I think that these days, a lot of parents don't even know about civility in order to pass it along to their children. And so I agree with you that our whole entire society, top to bottom, needs an infusion of it. But there is also an element of it that is about equity and about mutual respect. And I think that that would come in really handy in terms of handling our immigration challenges that are going to come to the fore within the next, you know, year to forever, because we are a country of immigrants and that'll never change. So the more we can learn the skills to deal with it, the better off we are. And I would love to see your, gosh, what did you call it? Your civility. Um, you have a way of assigning like a civility
Scorecard? The scorecard?
scorecard. Yes, yes, yes. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
To political candidates, because I think that that is a perfect representation of, you know, character and their fitness for office. So I think that civility scorecard could be used in a lot of different ways, but again, I love the idea of the lawn sign too, because that's enough to get people, you know, thinking and talking, you know, right there. And it's kind of a backdoor way of introducing people to Freemasonry who may not be already familiar with it. So I want to thank you for your time. It has been a small group, but I think we're mighty. And, you know, we will continue to spread the word and the good message that your group has started. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate.
Well,
I'm putting a
go ahead.
couple links in the chat pursuant to what Lynn just said. So feel free to pop them open if you want.
I see Denise is taking some serious notes over there. And that's a good thing. You want to add anything, Denise?
I, no specific thing, because every topic that I hear, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, no, I understand. Because I think the thing that I struggle with the most is, you know, now becoming a Freemason and dealing with people who are Freemasons, and for the most part, abide by all our obligations and precepts. But, you know, nobody's perfect. But my biggest struggle is like when you're trying to talk to people outside of Freemasonry who really haven't gone through that process of going through the ritual and learning and kind of like doing these obligations and precepts, and you're like, you know, how do you change their mind? They're so entrenched in their opinion and things. So that, you know, it's like a, you know, like I'm gullible. You know, I went in there and went through everything, and I expect everybody to now be perfect. You know, I know obviously not really, but, you know, like be better people and all that. And then when I don't see that, I'm like, I can't believe, you know, that these people are, you know, went through all this and they're not like that. And then you're like, if they're not even to that standard, now you're trying to talk to people outside the lodge, and you're like, like sometimes you don't even know what to say, how to approach people and how to make that difference.
It can be very disheartening. And as you can probably imagine, as Grandmaster of a jurisdiction the size of California, we have a lot of Masonic trials every year. And, we'd sit in executive committee and we would dispense with them. And you're just totally disheartened. What is it? Come on. And then I'd have the privilege of going and doing something pleasurable, some kind of ceremony or whatever with Masons practicing Freemasonry well. And what I reminded myself is, I believe that the percentage of, I'm going to phrase it, Masons acting like children is a far smaller percentage than you find in general populace. And again, we all err. And there are some jerks who become Masons. There are some people who are not worthy of the craft. And our job is to, better mind the West Gate. And I notice the way I said that. I didn't say guard the West Gate, but better mind it. When 4.5% of the male population were Masons, now it's less than 1/10. Does that mean we're doing a better job of minding it? No. But they did just let anybody in at that time. But they held each other more accountable than I think we're doing today. We need to call out poor behavior. We have to do it in the proper way, the Masonic civil way. And if it doesn't get rectified, and if it's chargeable with Masonic offenses, we need to do that. And on the front end, we need to do a better job of not letting the wrong people in to the best of our ability.
And this is the reason why I left Maryland Masonic Research Society. I hate to say it, but Russ, I'm going to need you to be my mentor because I'm I've been since I've come out and doing public speaking and education, I'm very passionate about the craft and the principles. And when you meet me in person and we have one-on-one talks, and I love history, so, I can talk your head off about this stuff. But when it comes to the politics, I always kind of kept, I was told by one Grand Commander, just keep your head down, it'll blow over. I went through the same thing, but that was the difference between this person being a French person and me being an African American. So I've experienced a lot of discrimination to the point I'm gonna call the lodge out, Amuna in Washington, D.C. I'd had these women, because when I first came to Masonry, I didn't have any ambitions. I just really wanted to, other than learning what my elders, what made them wise, because I really looked up to my grandfather and my father and some other male role models in my family, because I was like, y'all smart. And I wanted to learn what they learned. And that was why I joined Masonry. It was not to hold any power or control. I was very enthusiastic, always writing stuff down and doing my own research. And that's how I created my own library at home. But I got to the point with Amuna that I saw things I didn't like, discrimination against LGBTQ, which was questionable when people applied. Also against people of color at a certain class level, because you got to remember, Europeans, they discriminate on class versus not so much as race. And I had been for years, I think at that time it was I've been with them for 10 years, and I had a long list because I watched every worshipful master and made a very long list of do's and don'ts and what I would have done differently. They knew that I was going to come and bring change, so that scared the crap out of them. And I had 3 brunches with these certain women to tell me, hey, don't run for worshipful master. Ma'am, that is up to the lodge to vote and decide, not
right.
you to bring me to brunch. I mean, if the food was good, but it did not make for a good environment in public for heated arguments. Then it followed me to New York, and then it followed me to George Washington Union. It's like they don't want to let go. I always say this, these women have been in masonry longer than me, 20 plus, 25 plus years. They had the same opportunities to go out here and be visible, number one, not be scared, and provide education. And most of them are married to regular American Masons, which I didn't understand. But to bring my point home, it's just that, like, I just think it's a really unfortunate and, situation that I was in. And this is the first time I'm actually being vocal about it. So yeah, I'm gonna need your mentorship outside.
I'm happy to do it. I've mentored some of your peers.
Okay.
And I will tell you, I used to be president of the National Civility Center. You saw the Civility toolkit that we had created together, and we were accomplishing great things together. And then we brought in this executive director who has, she's the civility experts up in Canada.
Mhm.
And she started treating me really poorly. I couldn't figure out why. We talk about it. I conclude that, our roles aren't clear between what the president should do, what the executive director should do, even though I was pretty clear on what a president does. So we wrote them up, we agreed to them, we go another couple months, and all of a sudden she's treating me really poorly again. And I just decided, there's clearly something there. I personally think she was prejudiced against us. Half the board was Masons. She was prejudiced against Masonry. I don't know if that's the case. And again, even though I had so much invested in it, we had so much invested, I just backed away from it. I'm not going to burn down the bridge on my way out. You all do what you're going to do, and we're going to go on our own. And, there's times to turn the other cheek. But there are times where you need to go in there and, pardon me, but get bloody,
And
because it's that
yeah,
important.
I'm trying to push for that right now, and people are choosing comfort over courage. And they know, like, we went through this whole conflict resolution, mediation, and there was some interference, a lot of interference. People who didn't even have anything to do with it got involved. And I'm to the point now, I'm just ready to explore other options. I mean, I didn't come for political stuff. And
Life's too short.
yeah. And it's sad that they don't want to just call this other person out on being truthful. And because this person has caused a lot, I actually had a miscarriage because I was attacked on Superiority by a regular Mason, Maryland Mason, who I'm not gonna put his name out there, because they were upset I left MMRS, and why, they were trying to bait me into an argument online, and this was being recorded internationally. So some regular Masons knew the situation, kind of jumped in, but I was really upset that this could have been resolved within our Grand Lodge, and didn't get to
I'm
the
sorry.
Yeah, that I got upset. I was at high risk pregnancy at that, and I lost my child because of this person.
Wow. I feel for you. It's getting late where most of you are. I still have a whole half day of work I need to do today. I've thoroughly enjoyed the time with you all. I think you all know how to reach me. I can put it in the chat again if need be, but don't hesitate.
Well, thank you very much for, like I said, taking time out of your schedule to give us some further enlightenment and enrichment. And I will have the recording once my ban. I've been placed in Facebook jail. It's on I'm right now, it's live on my personal Facebook page, but the group page, I'm gonna have to wait till tomorrow to put up the recording. And next month on January 13th, we will have Brother is it Istov? It's the van, with his book. He just wrote a book on, daily Masonic, thoughts or something like that. I'm not looking at my notes. I'm just going off the top of my head, but that's what's coming up next month in February. Trying to gear up for a nice presentation from a Prince Hall brother. So just stay tuned. I'll have the information posted.
I just wanna say that thank you for the invitation to this meeting. I find it really useful for me, so I'm thankful. And congratulations, Russ.
Thank you, Luis. In what part of Mexico are you?
In Torreon,
Which I'm not
Is-
familiar. Where is that?
California, in Coahuila, south of Texas.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good.
It's about 12
Well, thank
hours
you.
south of the border, about 12 hours south of El Paso. I had the good pleasure to meet
Wow.
Luis when I visited my wife's family down there.
Ah, that's the
Oh, neat.
connection.
Yeah, and Brother Luis here is fantastic. He's very intelligent too. Don't let him hide the fact that he's a brain surgeon. Literally.
Well, I'm a rocket surgeon, so
Never know when
thank
you
you
might
for
need
joining
one.
us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Gonna take his name down right now.
Do you give group discounts? Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you so much
Thank you. Goodbye,
pleasure.
all.
for the
See you.
invitation, Cleo. Take
Bye.
care.
Y hermano
And
Luis,
happy
gracias por
holidays.
apoyarnos. Nos vemos muy
Yeah.
pronto.
Nos
And
vemos.
happy holidays to you all.
Ciao.
Thank you. Oh, let me stop the recording on Facebook. How do I do that? I guess I have to end the meeting. All right, guys. Have a good one.